476 million indigenous people across 90 countries, making less than 6% of the world's population, yet accounting for at least 15% of the world's poorest. Despite facing systemic challenges, the indigenous communities are custodians of over 5,000 cultures and speak the majority of the world's 7,000 languages. Across regions, young indigenous leaders are actively shaping policies and critical issues such as land rights, climate justice and education. To explore how indigenous youth in Botswana contributes to policies that secure their full participation in the development of the country, I'm joined by Mr. Samuel Stanley, Indigenous Inc. Network Chairperson. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us on Botswana Television.
Oh, good evening, and thank you for having me on this important day. And as we are celebrating the World Indigenous Day yesterday, I think it's a pleasure and a great opportunity to be seated here.
That's incredible. Now let's start by understanding the purpose of the day. Let's just start by the day, the celebration that this day was earmarked by UN. Why is it important to host these days?
Okay, and I'll first start by saying the term indigenous peoples, we need to understand what it means. And it commonly refers to communities such as the Basara or the San people and other minorities or other minority ethnic groups that have a distinct cultural, linguistic, and they do have these traditional heritages, and they still abide to that and they still practice that. These are people that we feel that they still have that bit and sense of culture living with them. So this day is very important. It's like celebrating your Independence Day. We have to celebrate the indigenous people because these are people who have struggled in the past of the days, and they are still upholding and having to practice their culture, and they are likely to lose it. That's why we are coming to a point where we are now trying to celebrate the World Indigenous Peoples Day, because we want to know that they are there. And I'm happy that the UN is a very special body that is supporting fully the indigenous people, because we do have forums that are hosted or that are engaged, and the forums that are planned for by the United Nations. For example, we have the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. We do have the business forums, and we also do have the indigenous youth forums that are hosted by the United Nations and the organizations like the FAO. So yeah,
we'll get deeper into that as we continue with the conversations. You earlier on mentioned that in Botswana we have a Basara. Maybe you can get into the nitty-gritties, because there are those who claim they are indigenous people, and there are those who say no, the indigenous people. And what determines them to be indigenous?
Yes, I would love to say these are communities that face a bit of socio-economic struggles, and they are marginalized and policy-making bodies. So in Botswana, we do have the San people, and you should remember that we have the Khoi San. So it's a broad thing, because we do have the Khoi San and we have the San community. So in Botswana, I would love to clearly say this on the national TV, that we don't have Basara. Because Basara is just a word that is used by the Tswana-speaking tribes, trying to classify them as one people or one group because they have similar cultural practices. But then the same people they have different clans or different groups. We have the Naro people, we have the Ganakwe, we have the Kro, and we also do have the Nama people who are coming from the Khoi side. So the San people are considered to be the indigenous people in Botswana because of what I've earlier said, that because of the struggles that they have faced, and for them to be fully and having this struggle of to be marginalized. Yes.
You earlier on mentioned the issue of some struggles that they go through or challenges. Let's get to those to understand what is it that these indigenous people are conditioned on.
The indigenous people are facing a lot of challenges in our country and globally. The first thing that I would talk of is the issue of we don't have land tenure rights. As the indigenous people come and get our land, and even to a point where the government can come and claim our lands. We do have issue of limited access to resources. We don't have resources at our communities. For example, even access to health and education. You would find it difficult for a young Mosara person or Mosara elders staying in those rural areas. They don't have better health facilities. We don't have better education. We don't have land rights. Even the human rights are being stepped into sometimes by the people that we are living with in our communities or by our governments. And those are the problems that we are facing. We also have the climate change actions that are affecting us as the indigenous people, because at point we are not fully made part of the decision making and policy making bodies, rather in situations where we are staying in our own communities, but we are not included in this particular decision making policies.
That's incredible. Now, in what ways are indigenous youth, especially because you are a youth and you come from an organization holding all that conversations, are you involved in national or local policy making processes? What barriers still exist? What are those things that are stumbling blocks?
So I'd love to say that the indigenous youth in Botswana, they are increasingly engaging in this policy spaces through youth councils. We do have the climate actions, and I'm currently sitting as the climate change district champion from the Botswana Climate Change Network. And also we do have representation in civil societies. I'm a youth, I'm the director of an indigenous youth led organization called the Indigenous Network. We do see our indigenous youth in civil societies like the Sen Research Center, we have the Family Support Center, and we have the Botswana Kwaedom Council. We see representation of youth, but there are barriers that are affecting or making youth not to be part of this, because one thing that I'll talk of is the issue of mindset change. We as the Sen people, we believe that we are nobodies. We can't make part of this policy decision making bodies because of the mindset that we already have, I think, from the past. That's why you see that the Sen people were nomadic people, and they have been moved from their places, and you also only see them in places like commercial farms. They are always at the back. They are not at the forefront. So those are one of the barriers that are affecting us, and also the issue of language barriers.
Before we get into the language barrier, I want us to get into the issue of the very first barrier that you mentioned about mindset change. Where is it coming from? Is it something that you are instilling community to say you are also able to do this? You can be at the table with those who are making decisions. You can make a change. In fact, you can be on a national television to talk to others and influence them. Maybe you can get to that. Where do we see all these things stemming from?
I think they come from our communities. Our communities are the ones that are killing us as the indigenous youth or the indigenous people. Because even from our parents, if you want to try to join something, even at school, maybe a kid wants to join, maybe, let me say, soccer, they believe that you cannot do it. So our communities are killing us. That is why you see that the indigenous youth or the indigenous people are always at the back. But we want to see that change, because now we do have representation at the political level. We do have our councillors. For example, the deputy council chair at Hansi District Council is a Sen youth. So we are seeing that change, and I hope that in close years to come, there's going to be that breakdown of mindset that we're having as the indigenous peoples.
What about acceptance from other communities? Because you mentioned that this coming from within, from the communities that the same people are within. So what about the mindset from other people in terms of accepting and just realizing that we are same people?
Yes, we do have that systematic discrimination coming from the people that we are getting along with, or people that we are living with within our communities. So, for example, you see that they feel that they are at the forefront. And if at a point maybe a Sen youth wants to do something, or a Sen child wants to participate in a kind of events, they would say, who do you think you are? You are not supposed to be here. But as we are trying to live with them and to engage with them, get well along with them, we do see these things change now, because we do have intermarriages. So at some point, this linear thing is going to break down, I think, because now we are one society, we are one family, and we are trying to get well along with them. So I think the response from other ethnic groups is getting better as we go on, but it used to be hectic. I used to be not accepted. Yes.
All right, now let's get to the issue of language, because I did catch you earlier on before you got into it. Yeah.
Language is a very vital and sensitive issue to talk about, because growing up, we grew up in commercial farms. We don't know Setswana. We have never get to know Setswana anyway. we don't know English. So once I step into my standard one, we do have this issue of language barriers. We fail to comprehend to the contents that are being given at school. We fail to converse with other students and to converse with our teachers and stuff because of this issue of language barrier. So the main thing that we are advocating for as the Indigenous Eng Network and other civil societies that are representing the Indigenous communities is the issue of adopting the mother tongue policy to be part of our education policy, yes, to be part of our curriculum in Botswana, because we also need our youth to engage. They should be the ones that are used to teach these languages. For example, I come from a narrow clan. We do have a developed orthography of our language. We do have the New Testament and the Old Testament. We do have newspaper outlets that we are writing in our own language. So I think this thing is vital and we need to push it to be done, because when you go to places like Kenya and South Africa, there are some of the indigenous languages that are used. When we go to Namibia, Afrikaans is part of their curriculum and Herero. So why can't we try and adopt the same policies into our curriculum?
In acceptance of other, minority groups. But what policies do you believe are mostly, urgently needed to support the rights as well as being of indigenous communities? The mostly that needs to be given priority right now.
And let me take you back to the Pitseng case. So the main thing and that the main policy, the urgent aid policies that we want as the indigenous people is the issue of land tenure reforms. We want to have our lands. There have to be a specific section or specific laws that are speaking to the indigenous people's land rights, because we don't have land rights as the same people.
Right now, yeah.
And also we need the economic empowerment policies focusing on the indigenous cultural tourism and formal recognition of indigenous languages so that we can protect our cultural identity. And also I think Botswana has to ratify the ILO Convention 169, because that is the convention that is speaking to indigenous rights, and it speaks to the governments now abiding and how they should take care of the indigenous people, because we've not ratified international law because our constitution is so silent on indigenous people. We used to have a section, I think section 14 of 2002 Constitution of Botswana. It used to speak to indigenous people that they have the right to free movement within their areas, but with no explicit sections speaking to indigenous people, I think then there is no need. We are going to talk about these policies, but they are not going to happen. So I think we need to ratify the ILO Convention 1969. I mean 169.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, how can policymakers be held accountable to the needs and rights of indigenous people, especially youth? Because you're talking about their rights being trampled upon, especially by the communities that they come from, or maybe by the governments, as you earlier on mentioned.
Taking you back to what? To our ILO 169 convention. How are you going to hold your policymakers accountable? Because with no laws, you cannot hold anyone accountable. So I think first we need to ratify our laws, and then we as the youth, we should make monitoring bodies that have youth representation inside. For example, we do have the interministerial committee that is ongoing right now. I see lack of youth representation in the committee, because we need to have a youth representation on those committees, because we understand our issues more than other people do. And we also need annual public reporting so that we can hold these policymakers accountable. You need to keep record of them and tell them, you promised us this, but we cannot see this. And also we need to strengthen our legal frameworks, because I told you that the Constitution is silent. We do have tribal land acts, and they are silent to send lands and issues like that. So if we strengthen our legal frameworks, we monitor the bodies that are into place, and we ensure that there is a lot of youth representation within this particular policies, committees.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, what is your vision for the future of indigenous youth in this country and maybe the region, because they are not only in this country?
I would say my vision for Botswana, where indigenous youth are not only culturally grounded, but we also need to see them fully integrated into the national development plans. We want to see our youth in parliament. We want to see our youth at Ntlwadi Khosi. And we also have a future where a son child can become a policymaker without having to abandon their cultural identity. We don't want people to see us as people of the past. We are living in the 21st century. You expect me to be on my matlalo and you are putting on your nice suit. I think that's something else. So my message is I want a Botswana or the world where an indigenous youth can stand up and say they are proudly a SEN student or they are proudly a SEN youth. They are proudly coming from these peripheral areas. They can stand up and say, for example, I come from a small village called Chobukwani and Hansi district. I should stand up and put my village on the map and say, I'm indigenous, but here I am. So I want a future Botswana where every youth is proud of who they are.
All right.
Yes.
Now, in your opinion, does a formal education system in Botswana reflect and respect indigenous cultures, because it also comes from the grassroots?
I doubt the formal education is kind of inclusive. I talked about the issues of language barrier in our education system. So I think there are barriers and there are gaps that need to be filled when it comes to our formal education. So yes, a bit is there, but we don't see it beneficial to us, because even 10 out of students that are passing the JC, the BGC, SE and coming to tertiary, we receive small numbers. That one on its own shows that we are suffering as people that are living in this indigenous communities. We want an inclusive education system that is able to accept our mother tongues, that is able to accept our cultures, because you would find out that even some of the cultural practices that are noted or that are written in this textbooks and the content that we are given. For example, I'll take you back to the issue of the Baherero. There was this trending issue that used to say that when one of them is passed or died, you have to replace the same person the same night on the burial day. So there are some gaps and misinformed information that are in our context. So I think they have to come to us, engage our elders, engage community leaders, engage the youth when they are trying to document this cultural practices and cultural knowledges. So I think we need to go back and work hard so that there is going to be an inclusive education system.
All right. You're talking about the preservation of culture. That is what the SEN people are holding on to. We're talking about the descending of, technology, the time that we are living in. As the young people are growing up, they're exposed to this. How about, losing the taste of your culture? Or how do you preserve, using the technological means to preserve our cultures and moving with times, and not to look at, the SEN people, as you already mentioned earlier, that they are people of the past. And
as I have mentioned earlier on, we are living in the 21st century and we cannot live without technology. We also need to take part into this technology lifestyle that we are living in and adapt to the new norm. And I attended one of the radio interviews at Yarona FM, and we are talking about how the indigenous people merge with AI. So we need our language to be documented. They need to be part of our technology. If you just get into your Google, you type in your language or you type in English, it responds in my language. So we are trying to also encourage the youth to take part into these platforms and to ensure that they are part of the policy changes. We have to ensure that we are not left out, because if we just sit, we are not going to tackle the issue of technology. And we should know that for you to understand more technology into depth, you need to have went to school. So we do experience law students going to school coming from indigenous communities. So that is one thing that we also need to push as indigenous youth leaders.
All right. As you're already mentioning that, because I'm also interested in the work that you or others who are in the forefront doing in order to encourage others. I was talking with someone here last week, and we're talking about representation, to say some people are only going to be propelled to certain heights only because they see themselves in those places. What is your in order to encourage those who are coming behind to say, if Stanley did this, I can also do this?
We are doing a great job, I would say, for now, because around June I hosted an event called the Indigenous Youth Summit, where I called all the youth from different communities, from different indigenous communities, so that we can come and sit down and draft the same policy that we can submit to the government, or the same policy that we can submit to the UN, that these are our needs and this is what we are demanding, this is what we want. So events like that, where you call indigenous youth and it's only you guys from the indigenous communities, you are free to discuss. And we also do have issues of encouraging our youth to be part of all the committees, like to engage in, for example, the village development committees. And also we do have issues of talking about cultural revitalization, because culture is very important. Remember, so at our organization and some of the organizations that I know, for example, the Family Support Center, the Sen Youth Network, we do go to our communities, we involve the youth, we do have khotla meetings. If there are some sponsorship opportunities, we also advertise. And if there are international forums, for example, the United Nations Permanent Forum, we advertise on our Facebook pages so that all the youth can apply, and we do encourage them to apply, and we help them with the processes so that we are not the only ones that are at the forefront. They should also come and make a change. Yes.
We are wrapping up this conversation. What message do you want to share with global leaders about the role of indigenous youth in shaping the future?
I would love to say indigenous youth are not passive beneficiaries of development. They are innovators, and they are cultural custodians, and they are also leaders. So the global leaders must recognize that protecting the indigenous rights is essential in achieving the sustainable development, climate resilience, and the cultural diversity of the indigenous communities. Also, the voice of the indigenous youth from Botswana to the Amazon must shape the policies that determine our shared future. So in simple, I would say, indigenous people are there. We should learn and live with them. We should accept them and know that they are also bringing change to our communities and bringing change to our governments.
Mr. Samuel Stanley, that's how we come to the end of this conversation. Thank you so much for such insights.
Thank you very much.
And that is how we come to the end of this conversation. Remember, I had in studio with me Indigenous Inc. Network Chairperson, Mr. Samuel Stanley, to explore how indigenous youth in this country can contribute to policy that secure their full participation in the development of this country. I'm coming right back. Don't move. Well, now grazed